The Oklahoma City Thunder have started the offseason with a bang. They are trading away Josh Giddey in exchange for Alex Caruso from the Chicago Bulls, and that might not seem like a massive trade, but it absolutely is. The funny thing is, I was actually standing right here when the Woj notification came through, and I was doing a Thunder offseason video, and I was talking about all these different options they might have in free agency, being able to add, trade picks, add different guys. I've been thinking for days about what exactly OKC needs, and apparently they wanted to go ahead and get a jump start on it before the draft. And I think we have to start with the Oklahoma City side of this, because when you continually looked at the needs for Oklahoma City, what did they need to add to the roster on a team that was the second youngest team in the entire league this past season, the youngest team to ever win a postseason series? The other teams around them in terms of youth in the league are like San Antonio, Charlotte, Portland. They are arguably the most successful young NBA team of all time. And they have an opportunity to continue to add pieces due to their assets, cap space, all that stuff, and really be true contenders. And keep in mind as well, this is an Oklahoma City team that went 6 games with the Mavericks, which at the time felt like an upset, but that team goes on to make the finals. And Oklahoma City can look back at that series and think, man, if we'd played a little bit better, a couple different things went our way, they could have been in the Western Conference Finals or maybe even the finals. And it's clear that they are being aggressive in adding pieces. And the guy that was always going to be the odd man out, I talked about this when the Thunder season was over, was going to be Josh Giddey. Obviously, the piece that people are going to talk about all offseason long, and I think is decently likely to be traded, assuming Oklahoma City wants to make a move, would be Josh Giddey. I talked about this during the season. I think that there is some potential for him when he's kind of the creator on the team, someone that can set other guys up, obviously as a spacer alongside SGA, and an Oklahoma City team that needs spacing. Giddey just isn't a natural fit. They needed a connective piece. They needed a fifth starter. Their other 4 guys, SGA, Chet, Jalen Williams, and Lou Dort, those are the guys. Those guys were always starting and finishing games. Then they couldn't figure out what else to do with that spot. Sometimes it was Giddey in the postseason. Sometimes it was Aaron Wiggins. Sometimes it was Isaiah Joe. They didn't have a fifth guy. Well, now they do. Because if you look at a lot of different advanced metrics, Alex Caruso is one of the best, if not the best, perimeter guard defenders in the entire league. There's a reason that there have been rumors about Caruso potentially getting traded from Chicago for 2 seasons now. It's because he's that good defensively, because he had that much value. I speculated that at this most recent trade deadline, the Bulls could have gotten 2 first-round picks in exchange for Alex Caruso. Of course, ultimately, they decided to go out and get a young player in Giddey, who we're going to talk about here in a second. But I cannot overstate how big of a deal it is for Oklahoma City to get a guy that is just absolutely perfect for them and what their roster needed before we even get to free agency. Because one of the values of Caruso is that he's not getting paid that much money. He's on this bargain contract from when he got signed away from the Lakers a handful of seasons ago, and he's gotten even better in Chicago. And now OKC has that guy. Him, Dort, Jalen Williams, SGA, and Chet. That is going to be an awesome 5-man lineup. And the 2 different things that OKC needed this offseason was a fifth starter, someone that can play well on the wing, someone that works well alongside their other guys, and they need help in the front court. And they've already helped one of those things without even touching their $35 million in salary cap space that they're going to have once free agency opens here in a couple of weeks. I cannot overstate how big of a deal it is for Oklahoma City to get one of the most coveted role players in the entire market in exchange for a guy in Giddey that was not in their long-term plans. Now, the one thing that I will say about Caruso is the way that OKC plays. There's a lot of 5 outs, a lot of drive and kick. They try and space the floor a ton. Caruso's 3-point volume is going to have to increase, and he's going to have to be a better shooter. He's not a bad shooter. He's just more unwilling than you would want for someone in this Oklahoma City offense. That's one of the reasons why I speculated they might go out and get someone like Malik Monk or Klay Thompson in free agency, which is still a possibility depending on how willing those guys would be, or Caruso would be, to potentially play off the bench. That's the only real piece to this that I have an issue with. But quite frankly, that's an issue that we had with someone like Drew Holiday with Milwaukee. And then he gets to Boston where they really prioritize all this 5-out stuff, and he has the best shooting season of his career. I'm not saying that Alex Caruso is going to be Oklahoma City's Drew Holiday, but it is within the realm of possibility. And the idea of him shooting better in Oklahoma City than he has the last few seasons in Chicago is very, very real. Speaking of Chicago, let's go to the other side of this. If you're a Bulls fan, you cannot like the trade return. If you like, that's fine. If you're not a huge Josh Giddey fan, that's fine. This is such an important piece of information that you now have, because the team and the organization is clearly willing to go in a younger direction. They are finally realizing that this is not anything better than a 40 to 44 win team. It's never going to be more than that. It's never going to be a contender. It doesn't matter what you do with the pieces. If you continue to bring them back, if Lonzo somehow comes back and is healthy, it's just not going to happen. And this is the first real move that actually illustrates that this front office, this organization, understands that to be true. In terms of Giddey specifically and his fit in Chicago, I speculated about this throughout the season. Through even 10 games into the year, I talked about how Oklahoma City was really good, but Giddey was just in the way a lot. He just didn't shoot the ball well enough compared to all the other guys that they have. And I also speculated that if I was a team out there, I mentioned Chicago specifically, if I was a team out there that needed a little bit more creation, playmaking, Giddey is a guy that I would at least look at, because he's one of those guys that is always going to look worse in a situation like what he was placed in Oklahoma City, rather than a situation that he might end up in Chicago, because everything about what OKC did was SGA and spacing, SGA and spacing. And Giddey isn't either one of those things. And at times, he had some decent moments as a creator. I think he lost confidence, especially in the postseason. But there is something to be said about a guy that is 6'8", has good passing instincts, can guard a little bit, and is just going to gain confidence from being the primary creator for a team that is asking him to be a primary creator. Now, Chicago has other guys that are going to need the ball. Of course, Kobe White, depending on what they do with DeMar DeRozan. Maybe Lonzo comes back at some point. But it's still a good bet on the youth and the potential long-term value of someone like Giddey, because, yeah, you could maybe get a pick or two for Caruso, but arguably Giddey is worth more than that to Chicago because of what you know that he could be and what he showed in his first few seasons in the league. And then maybe you're just betting on the situation not being great for him in Oklahoma City. In terms of a grade for each, I think this is A to an A+ for Oklahoma City 100 out of 100 times. I mean, if you could put together a realistic list of 5 guys that OKC would have wanted to add to their team this offseason, Caruso's on that list. And they got him before they've even really gotten to the heart of their additions in terms of free agency and potentially the draft and more trades. They didn't give up any picks in this deal. It can't, again, I keep saying this, can't be overstated how good of a deal this is for Oklahoma City. For Chicago, I'm going to give it a B. I love the concept. I love the idea of finally moving on and trading away Caruso, but I don't want to give them too much credit for making an obvious choice rather than actually evaluating the value in the deal. Giddey's fine. I think he has an opportunity to potentially grow and improve. I think maybe they could have gotten more for Caruso, and there were other options out there that would have been more interesting for them in terms of younger guys to add. But there's a real possibility that a year from now, Giddey looks like a relatively foundational piece for the future of the Chicago Bulls, and that Alex Caruso was one of the huge missing pieces for Oklahoma City as they go into potentially the conference finals or the finals. Again, keep in mind, it's the youngest team in the league, one of the youngest teams in the league last year, and that now also has $35+ million in salary cap space available with, theoretically, their entire starting 5 in place. They can go out and get Jonas Valanciunas. They can go out and trade for Clint Capella. They can sign Klay Thompson. They can sign Malik Monk. They've got all this salary cap space. This is as good of a step one to the offseason for Oklahoma City as they could have possibly hoped for.